Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today we have Danielle Foreman on the show. She is a domestic, verbal, and sexual abuse survivor. She is also an expert in finance and has a heart for those wounded by financial abuse. She has an extensive background in finance, startups, and trust planning, and she's been doing this for over 15 years. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, we were shocked at the statistics of financial abuse and are so thankful to have you on the show to discuss this very important topic. 98% of abuse victims also suffer from financial abuse, and they continue to suffer financially in the aftermath of the abuse. So first, we want to educate our listeners on what financial abuse is.
Financial abuse often begins subtly and progresses over time. The aim of financial abuse, as with other forms of abuse, is to gain power and control in a relationship. Financial abuse, along with emotional and physical abuse, manipulation, intimidation, and threats, are all aimed at getting and maintaining control over another person. The purpose is to trap them in the relationship. It's important to know that financial abuse can happen to anyone regardless of their income, education, or independent success. Despite great diversity, survivors face similar struggles, challenges, and conflicts as they try to care for their families, secure work, and find affordable housing and create long-term assets.
Financial abuse is a tactic used to control relationships by preventing access to money or other financial resources. In other cases, the financial abuse may be much more overt. Abusers commonly use violence or threats of violence and intimidation to keep the victim from working or having access to the family funds. Financial abuse, while less commonly understood, is one of the most powerful methods of keeping a survivor trapped in an abusive relationship and deeply diminishes the victim's ability to stay safe after leaving an abusive partner. Research indicates that financial abuse occurs in 99% of domestic violence cases. Surveys of survivors reflect that concerns over their ability to provide financially for themselves and their children was one of the top reasons for staying in or returning to an abusive partner. As with all forms of abuse, financial abuse occurs across all socioeconomic, educational, and racial and ethnic groups. So what does financial abuse look like?
Financial abuse is one form of domestic abuse. Withholding money, stealing money, and restricting the use of finances are some examples of financial abuse. And for me, this is something I experienced when I was 23. Not knowing a ton about finances at the time, even though I had grown up investing in the stock market, I didn't really know how to be responsible for my own finances. My ex-husband actually opened tons of bank accounts, credit cards, lots of things I didn't know about, and just slowly took my paycheck actually from me. So it was one of those things where he began withholding money from me, so I didn't have access to buy anything. And then he started stealing it, and he actually was offshoring money. And there was things that were happening that I just wasn't aware of because I didn't really know what was coming in as well. So I've experienced it on both ends. I've had a very restricted access to money, and then I've also had all the financial weight dumped on me. So I've kind of had both ends. And I've also, when I've been dating somebody, had someone want me to expose all my financials, basically.
Yeah. So we're just going to go through some of the things that are financial abuse, just for our listeners.
Forbidding you to work or telling you where you can and cannot work. Pressuring you to quit your job, sometimes using children as an excuse. Criticizing or minimizing your job choice or career. Forbidding you from attending job training or advancement opportunities. And I know I was a stay-at-home mom, and then I homeschooled for 9 or 10 years. So when things were getting to the point for me, I knew I had to get a job. I didn't have a college degree, but I know when I got a part-time job, actually at Apple, I was trying to get a work from home job because I thought, I'm going to keep homeschooling. And that was my focus. And that didn't happen. And I feel like God totally opened up the door. I wasn't even expecting to work at the Apple store, but I feel like God wanted me to get out of the house and be around people. I needed that. And it was out of my comfort zone because I'm not a super techie person, but think getting that job for me, and I don't think he was real happy about that, because that definitely added more pressure in our marriage, but that was kind of the beginning of the end, I think, for me, for our marriage.
Did you have that happen to you, Danielle?
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's interesting because my first ex-husband really didn't want me to go to law school. So I actually got in, I was transferring from Washington, D.C. to Pepperdine University in California. And he actually didn't give me the letter that I got accepted. And he really wanted me to stay home, and we didn't have kids yet, but he's like, you don't need to go there. He literally wouldn't let me go, or he was going to leave me. But I've seen this on the flip side as well, which is kind of interesting. I think this is something that people don't think about. My second ex-husband refused to go to work.
Well, yeah, that's what happened to me.
And it was kind of an interesting way that I maybe didn't see coming, because it's one thing to keep me home, right? Abusers love to keep you isolated from other people, because what if you tell someone? But then it was like he controlled me by not letting me do as much because he was home with the kids. And so I had this obligation to always be at home instead of us being equal in the workforce, which would have been a lot more freedom. And I think it would have obviously made our relationship better. But his control really came from staying at home. And it's interesting. It's not something you think about. Yeah.
That's what mine did too.
It definitely happens.
So a few more examples for work situations are sabotaging work or employment opportunities by stalking or harassing you at the workplace, or causing job loss by physically battering prior to important meetings or interviews, or preventing you from working by hiding your keys, unhooking your car battery, taking your car without permission, or offering to babysit and not showing up, interfering with your performance at work through harassing activities like frequent phone calls, emails, visits to the workplace. I think that last one's really common, where they try to harass you at work. And
yeah. I mean, I had an ex-spouse turn me into the FBI, just different financial institutions, all for harassment, to basically sabotage my entire career, everything I'd worked for exposing him. And so this is something I don't know, for me, maybe was the scariest part of the abuse, of knowing that somebody would go to the level of not even letting me provide for our kids. Not only do they hate me, they literally are just going to take me out and not even think twice about it. And I think that's what kind of pushed me over the edge and maybe made my anxiety a lot worse, because it's one thing to be with somebody abusive and feel like it's in this one aspect of your life. When they take over your workplace, it's a whole new level of fear, because you're like, they're not going to stop at anything. There's not somebody they're not going to expose you to. And I don't know about for you guys, but for me, this was probably the thing that really just rocked me. A lot of other things I've seen before, but this one I hadn't. So this one was really crazy to me.
I can relate to this one too. Controlling how all the money is spent, refusing to collaborate on finance, making you feel as though you don't have a right to know any details about money or household decisions, reducing your freedom to plan or budget, requiring you to account for every penny you spend, may even ask for receipts and change.
Yeah, I didn't have problems with this one, but that's a very common
I think I'm just
one.
now realizing how much that mindset from that I had in the marriage is still with me. It's still something I struggle with, because there was such an issue of control about no debt, how much everything revolved around the cost of everything, to the point of like, sometimes that doesn't matter,
Mine was a high roller, so he was so bad. He was so bad with money.
No receipts needed.
And he was a criminal.
I mean, I definitely experienced this. My first ex we were extremely wealthy from our tech business. I was the CEO of an engineering firm, and we had a lot of income that I didn't have access to. And the only thing I could do was buy myself a car. And this car was probably like a 5-year battle I remember going to court, and he wanted the judge to make me sell the car I was paying for, just because he thought it was ridiculous. And it's such a control. I mean, at the root of all this financial woes is control. Right. And I think that's really important to note, because it's a controlling pattern of behavior. And you'll see it show up in other areas, right? But this restriction, the idea of I'm going to hold you accountable to something I'm not accountable for, then you're not in an equal relationship to begin with. But my ex made me drive the most beat up car in the world that was leaking oil.
Mine too.
Yeah. And one of my first steps of getting out of that relationship was going by myself. I ordered myself a brand new Suburban and he lost it and he wanted me to give it back. And I finally was like, I'm not giving up the car. And it seems so dumb to me now because now I'll go buy whatever car I want. But that was a real, I had that mindset of I want to please my husband.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to trust them. But that is not a sign of trust. And even coaching couples in finance now, I watch for that. When I have a man say, well, she needs to stick to this budget, I'm like, ooh, it doesn't sit well with me. Because I'm like, in an open, equal relationship, you guys are on the same page. So maybe he's not explaining his side of the story well enough that if he feels like he has to restrict her to a budget, and I'm like, she's not a kid. Yeah. The first thing that pops up in my mind, right? It's this mindset, and it happens vice versa with, women can put the men on the budget. And sometimes there's a need for this. Right. A lot of times there's not.
Yeah.
So
I've known a lot of women have shopping problems and stuff. So I get the point.
Yeah. But there's a whole
what's it called? Retail therapy.
Right. Yeah. And there's a root cause of what that is.
Right.
But putting somebody on a budget is a control. Okay. It's not helping the root of a problem.
Good. Yeah, that's good.
That's kind of the issue.
My ex, I had a brand new Honda Accord and I think I was paying like, $400 a month. And towards the end of the marriage, he would not let me drive my car. He made me drive the car that was smoking on the freeway, leaking oil, driving 30 miles to work every day. He made me drive that car that broke down all the time. So yeah, and I was paying for the other car. So yeah, I can relate to that one as well.
Yeah.
The next point is criticizing every financial decision you make. That one's self-explanatory. Not including the victim in investment or banking decisions, making large financial decisions without your input, not allowing victim access to the bank accounts, preventing you from obtaining or using credit cards or bank accounts. And we talked about this, withholding money or giving an allowance. So those are all kind of in the same category there. You kind of went over that a little bit. Is there anything you wanted to add to those 4 points?
It's actually interesting that the bank account one, I actually get this question a lot just sitting down with couples in finance. And I'll either hear the story of we keep our own accounts or everything's joint, or we have one joint account, but our paychecks go to separate accounts. And I think in order to be in a healthy relationship, and not every one of these relationships is not, but in a healthy relationship, you can see all your accounts. There's nothing to hide. Right. And you're not concerned that somebody's going to spend money they shouldn't. And that's really the root of it. So that's an unhealthy start to any relationship, let alone in a marriage. If there is a reason that your spouse can't be on your account, then you need to kind of check that reason, go down the root and figure that out because something's wrong. That's what I would say. When I have my business accounts with my business partners, we're both on the accounts, right? I'm treating them as an equal. If I think they're going to go wire out the money tomorrow, then we have an issue in our partnership.
Right.
And that's the same thing I would say here. I've definitely had it where I've not been on any accounts before, except for a credit card. Like I remember I wasn't on a checking account. My second ex-husband literally did not want to be on any account because he thought it was tied to debt. So he put all the weight on me. But in an equal relationship, you need to be able to see what's going on with each other. And it's got to be open and honest. Otherwise, somebody's hiding something. It just is what it is. Every time somebody's hiding something. I have not seen it where it's not that way. And some people say it doesn't matter. It does matter because if people are hiding money, they have a backup plan and that's not healthy. And it's a sign of control.
Yeah, it all comes back to control. Forcing the victim to write bad checks or file fraudulent tax returns, refusing to work or contribute to the family income, like you were saying, withholding funds or resources for the victim or children for basic needs such as food, clothes, medicine, or shelter. And I've read a lot of stories where that happens in abusive relationships where they have young kids and they don't even give them enough hardly for formula or whatever they need for the kids.
Wow, that's horrible.
Yeah, I've read some really bad stories like that.
And let me touch on this one for a second, because I think the refusing to work and contribute to the family income and the one of withholding resources go hand in hand a lot of times. I know that my ex refused to work. And then if he did, he used all the money for himself, which felt more degrading than just having money withheld from me because I had all the weight. And I think when you're in that position, I don't want to say it's easier to get out because you realize that you're going to have to pay your way out, which is a hard thing to get over. Realizing that the person abusing you, you're going to have to pay off to get out of it. However, this is like the red flag I need to get out. If your kids aren't first as far as needs and shelter, there's something wrong. My ex was buying drugs and alcohol. And when I found that out, I'm like, any of the money gets touched for those things. There should be things, I think, when you're single and when you're married, you refuse to spend money on. And I make that list up front. And I think it's a good thing to compare before you get married. What will you not spend money on?
Yeah,
and it sounds kind of odd, but when you're in a relationship and you realize, oh my gosh, my husband's willing to go to a bar and spend $1,000 tonight, that might not line up with your values or what you think is an important place of spending money.
Yeah.
It's better to know that right now than to get in a relationship and realize our finances are out of control because of that. It can also really lead to abuse, especially if they're spending the money on alcohol. But I see this a lot where they're like, or same thing with a woman, maybe she wants 6 Louis Vuitton purses and the husband already knows that's a deal breaker for him. Really great time before you get into something. What will you not spend money on? I think is a key, and it'll show a lot about a person.
Yeah, I remember us having issues with Christmas because Christmas growing up for me was a big deal. Like you get up and my mom and dad would go all out. And so when we had kids, of course, I wanted to go all out because I love Christmas. I love buying gifts for people. But oh my gosh, that caused so much stress in our marriage.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, big time. I think I actually had to sign a contract at some point because you will not spend over this amount on Christmas.
Wow.
Well, mine in the last 10 years, he refused to work because he was at that point was a felon and would say, well, I'm a felon. Who's going to give me a job? And I had to work like 16 hours a day. But anyway, I had my own separate accounts at the end because we were just trying to survive. I had to support the family and the kids. So I couldn't actually give him access to anything.
You're right.
So,
which is also a sign of financial abuse. If your partner isn't even legally allowed to be on your accounts or all your accounts will get drained, immediate red flag, right?
Yeah. Well, he was blacklisted from all the major banks.
Somebody can't survive without you. And this is how I look at it. If they need me to make their life even on an even playing field, no go, right? Like that's automatically, there will never be an equal weight in that relationship. Right. It's going to tilt onto me and I'm going to get back into an abusive situation. So that's a great example though. It does come up, where they're like, oh, well, I have child support. I have whatever it is owed and I can't go on an account. And I'm like, okay, right. That person needs to go get their life right. That's not on you. And I think this is important, as dumb as it sounds, because there's people in relationships right now, boyfriend, girlfriend, and they're like, oh, my boyfriend went through a lot. And I'm like, that's not for you to carry.
Yes.
Let him keep going through it until he fixes it.
Yeah.
Not your problem. And I think as women, especially, have this heart of we want to mend, we want to fix.
Yeah, we're nurturers.
You got to make sure that if he's a man, he's going to fix it himself without you being there, because it's only going to get worse later.
I was so young when I got married that, when you're really, really young and you haven't even finished college yet, and you definitely haven't even had to know if that person's going to be financially responsible yet because you're still kids. That's what makes it really hard when you get married young, I think, too. So, I don't know. The next one is hiding assets, hiding or taking funds and putting them in a private account. I think you said yours did that. Stealing the victim's identity, property, or inheritance, or stealing money from you or your family and force you to give access, passwords, account numbers, investment information to your money or financial accounts. He just did all that stuff on mine. And I think too, what's funny now, just being single, there is people when I start dating, they might show me a lot of what they have in hopes that I'll return the favor. And the answer is no. But it can seem really like transparent. It seems like, oh, wow, they're really trusting. It's a red flag. If a man is, when you start dating, showing you all his finances, supposedly, and what would like you to show yours, the answer is no. We don't share financial information unless we're in a committed relationship about to get married. Okay. And you have to put parameters around that. So just don't give out information. I mean, that's when you think about it fundamentally, it doesn't make any sense. And inheritance, things like that. Yeah,
I've had that happen.
Oh, you have?
I have. Yeah, I had my ex take all my inheritance money and put it in an account for himself.
Oh, wow.
And I was busy enough with 2 little kids that I didn't even know that's what he was doing. But it definitely happens. I see it a lot with trust accounts as well. And so I just always really caution, and this is a good way to, if you have an inheritance coming, you need other family members involved, I think kind of at all times, because sometimes other people will recognize it. And I think this is actually a good point in time too, to say, have your own financial professional. They will recognize abuse in the finance sector, because there's things we know that are normal and not normal. And I would really encourage everyone to have their own financial professional. That way, you know, if it's weird.
Right.
Or if there's something wrong. And that's something I didn't have going into my first marriage. And so I really didn't know how this was supposed to play out. I figured it out by the second time because I was my own. But I think that is key in this. Even if you're already married, go get one. They'll identify signs of abuse.
That's great. Now, you already talked about this, demanding or requiring you turn over paychecks or credit cards. I think you said he started taking your paycheck. Intercepting or opening your bank accounts and other financial records. I think that means like taking your mail and opening up your mail, right? I think that's what it means.
Yeah. And I think exactly, especially when it comes to like 401ks,
so it's wrong. So we're saying right now on this podcast, it's wrong for them to open your mail.
Yes.
Yes.
A red flag.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Red flag. Exactly.
Yeah. Taking money or using credit cards without your permission. And this one's interesting. Forcing the victim to work in a family business without pay.
Yeah. Red flag.
Okay, refusing to pay bills and ruining the victim's credit score, overusing your credit cards, running up large amounts of debt on joint accounts, claiming to make payments or pay bills in your name but not following through, borrowing money or making changes without repaying it, expecting you to pay for their bills or obligations, requiring you to bail them out of a difficult financial situation.
That was me. Sorry, I had to add that in. Go ahead.
Forcing the victim to turn over public benefits or threatening to turn the victim in for cheating or misusing benefits, and filing false insurance claims. That's quite a bit right there. I can't say I had to deal with any of those. So
that was a lot of all that is very.
I had filing false claims against me, but not. I see the insurance ones sometimes. Actually, I see it a lot where people are like, just lie, say this happened, so they can get money. And I think a lot of these signs too, the ones we just were reading, tend to be signs of people that have some kind of substance abuse as well.
Or some kind of addiction.
Or a gambling addiction.
Yes.
Yeah. So
that's a lot.
And it could be a sex addiction too, but there's usually some type of addiction. Yeah.
Sorry.
When there's money control, and this is how I always now I can trace, because I do a lot of investigation work for trust. And so whenever I see there's super tight money control, it's literally usually from an addiction, whether it's sex or, an actual substance or gambling. There is usually something it's attached to. People don't just control your money for fun. They're controlling it because they want to spend it on something different. And so these are their justifiable means of doing it. And I don't know if you guys experience that as well, but every time I've seen it, they have an addiction in something.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, that does.
So refusing to pay or evading child support or manipulating the divorce process by drawing it out and hiding or not disclosing the assets, and dragging the divorce proceedings in order to cripple you financially. I'm sure this one's very common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had that for a 2-year marriage. 3 years later,
Wow.
It almost broke me for sure. And I think this is one of those times where you just go back to God and you just lay it at his feet. And it is a hard one to stand through. I know why I think a lot of women fold in this one because it doesn't look like there's a way to end it.
Yeah. Even just thinking about that wears me out. So let's move on. May justify behavior as cultural. And that I definitely experienced. Force you to cash in, sell or sign over any financial assets or inheritance you own. Bonds, stock, or property. You already kind of went over that a little bit. Force you to agree to power of attorney in order to be able to legally sign documents without your knowledge or consent. Using your assets for their personal benefit without asking, and they feel entitled to your money or asset. Mine definitely felt entitled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have anything to add to any of those?
I think one, if somebody's already signed over power of attorney, I've seen this happen only one time, but I don't know how common it really is. It's still something you can get out of. And I think that's maybe something to put into this too. A lot of these are still things that with the right help, you can stop and get out of.
That's good to know.
So just don't think there's no hope, because that's not real.
So you can get out of power attorney. That's great to know.
You absolutely can. Yeah. There's also things where you can get your inheritance money back, things like that. I think sometimes people think once something's gone, it's done. And that's not true. So
unless they spent it all before you could get it back.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Offering to help with your budget or financial decisions as a cover for gaining control of your finances. Insisting you share your income but refusing to share theirs. Requiring that large joint purchases be in their name only, such as car loans, mortgages, cell phones, or apartment leases. forcing you to sign financial documents without explanation, making threats to cut you off financially when you disagree, becoming enraged over money, and then engaging in other forms of abuse like name-calling or physical violence. Anything you want to add to that?
I think the large joint purchases and stuff can go on the flip too. Mine walked out the door and left me with $2.5 million of debt and not a dime in his name. And
Wow.
I mean, had strategically done it so that I would owe 30 grand a month and he'd owe nothing. So I think look for that too, because it almost looks like they're kind of giving like, oh, no big deal. Do what you need to. I think that things should be shared equal weight. And I think that's a sign too. If somebody's not willing to take any load, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And then enraged over money. I mean, I think a lot of times this comes to substance abuses, but money can be a trigger for a lot of people for what they need. And if you're not willing to give it, it's going to trigger the next phase where they're going to be violent. Obviously, that's not normal, but it seems like a lot. It's almost overwhelming. Like, I don't understand just because we're arguing about money. And now you try to think of it as a miscommunication and just remember that it's not normal for people to be mad about money. That's actually not normal. It's a control tactic. And there's plenty of people that do not get mad over money.
Yes.
And so I think when this is all you think it's the norm and it's not.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's just another form of communication, but if that blows up your relationship, there is something wrong. Somebody's hiding something.
Yeah. And I mean, there's even like situations where I have a friend that her ex-husband just kept all the money. Like he just would never spend any and just kept saving and saving and saving. And like they had separate accounts, but just pretended like he just didn't have any money. I mean, that's not healthy either. So I'm glad you explained what it should look like. So we just wanted to move on a little bit here, talk about safety planning. So if you are in an abusive relationship, a financially abusive relationship, or any type of abuse, the first call of action is to develop a plan that will keep you and your family safe, and remaining safe is of the utmost importance during this difficult time. It's also important to work with an advocate, or like you said, someone like you who works with finances, a financial expert, victim service worker. It's also critically important.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what steps you should take if you're being financially abused?
Yeah, I think the first one to me is, depending on where the abuse is, a financial planner or advisor or even a banker would be great. So if there's anything wrong going on inside of your accounts or manipulation, making an appointment with them is free. And I think that's a very great first step.
Oh, it is free.
Yeah.
Okay. See, I thought you would have to pay. Okay.
If you have a planner you have to pay, find another one. Most planners now don't do fee-based planning. Yeah. So I would steer clear of that. Most planners are going to help you, even if it's 30 minutes of their time, explain what's going on. This is something they're well versed in, especially legally, as well as we know what you can and can't do. So that would be good advice. I mean, if you have somebody you feel like you can really trust, going to them. It's not always a family member. Sometimes you're in the situation you are because this is how you saw money growing up. So I would say a close friend or business associate, somebody that you feel like you've watched them with money and you respect their decisions. Not that they're perfect, but they would be probably a good person to go to as well.
Right.
And I think also just bringing to them, knowing what you have and what you don't know. Like, what are your questions? They'll help you lead to more questions typically. But the more knowledge you gain, it is power in this. And I think for me, after my first divorce, I'm like, I need to know what everything is, because I didn't have to ever know that before. And I actually became a financial planner because of this.
Oh, wow.
So now it's like not that easy to fool me. I'm still a generous person. It's not a control thing for me, but it needs to make sense. When somebody wants money, what are we talking about? Is it something we agree to? Or are you just throwing this at me?
Yeah, I was going to say, I reached out, didn't even go to this church, but it was a big church. He was kind of over the financial, they had like a financial ministry, and he met with me. I just now thought of that when you were talking about that. I think I met with him. I emailed him questions and he met with me, and he, his first word of advice is like, just start writing everything down you spend, just be accountable for, your own finances. He was really helpful to me, and I really appreciated that, he volunteered his time to help me in my situation. So sometimes it's even something like that. You can reach out to somebody that.
Yeah. I think another big thing in this too is just confidence in knowing who you are. I think when you know who you are, and I know this to be true for me, I don't feel like I really understood my value or my gifts. And so now knowing those, it's very easy for me to know where everything's at, keep track of it, and not feel the same financial weight of, I don't know what's going to happen next. That's never a good feeling. And so I think no matter what relationship you're in, or if you're not, you need to know this information. Right. And I think it says down here, like it talks about having birth certificates and all that stuff. That's just something as an adult you should have. And I think maybe we've depended too much on other people. And God's like, I've made you a whole person. So start out as a whole one in a relationship. Make sure you have all this stuff together. There's no reason why you can't have access to it. And I think you need to kind of look at it like that too. If I had somebody say, Danielle, why don't you have access to your checking accounts and kind of check me? It probably would have made me end things a lot quicker and differently, and take some of that control back. So it was weighted out and still end a relationship. But man, I didn't need to be subject prey to all of this either. There's a lot of things where you can have access to as a spouse, especially if you go into a bank with a marriage certificate, they can't really deny you access to accounts. So there's subpoenas you can issue. There's a lot of different things you can do to figure out where assets are. So just don't feel like you're going to have to just figure this out slowly. I don't know that that's always a good thing. The longer it goes on for, the bigger problem it is, and the more that's gone, and the more it wears on you. So once you find out there's abuse in this, you have to be prepared, I think, to take action. And this is the hardest part for people.
Yeah. So after we meet with somebody about our finances, whether that be a church or someone like you, then we need to find out what our assets are. And we can do that legally if we're married. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And if somebody has taken any money from you, you can also do that legally. It's not as hard as it appears to be.
Okay.
Social security cards, birth certificates, all that stuff is stuff you can go get. So if you don't have access to it, there are simple ways to go get this information. I would really stress, and I hate to say this, but I'd really stress going to an advisor or a banker over the church. And I know that sounds terrible, but not everyone's versed in actual finances and has licenses and have taken tests to actually know. So I hate for somebody to go to a pastor that's really kind and he's like, well, wait it out, track stuff. Okay, no, I'm going to ask you what's going on and we're going to make a plan.
Totally makes sense to me.
Yeah. You need information. We don't need to wait necessarily. Sometimes God's telling you to take action. Like he's showing you the red flags. So you take action, not wait it out. We don't need to watch a spouse take $450,000 from somebody's account to be like, there's financial abuse. Can tell you that it happened before that point. So this is just a matter of being proactive, and it's hard, but it's worth it. And it's going to give you the confidence you need to move forward.
All right. And is there any other steps that they should take?
As far as
just once they find out they're being financially abused?
If you don't have an advisor currently, I would ask around. A lot of times workplace, there'll be some of the people you work with will have an advisor, get a referral. You can go online now and find one and read people's profiles. If you bank somewhere, you can definitely set up a free meeting with an advisor at a bank. Anything's going to be better than nothing, just as far as he's going to give you a list of assets and debts. If you can't fill it out, then you need to say, how do I get help finding out this information? Because I don't know. Mm-hmm. And that will alert that person that you're working with. Sometimes you're going to have to go to a domestic violence advocate or an attorney or friends and family, just try to help and get more information. But I think having a list of debts and assets, if you can't fill it out, then there's something wrong.
Do you think that it's important for the person that needs to get out of the relationship to save any money or open up their own credit cards or checking accounts once they know that it's abuse?
Definitely, because it's almost a guarantee that if you have joint credit cards, you're going to get taken off of them when you leave them. So go open your own right now. And if you're just a signer on account, you can remove yourself. That's another thing. They won't come after you if you're a signer. So let's say that you have somebody that's crazy spending and you can't control it, but they added you onto the account. You can take yourself off. You're able to do that and you're able to open your own accounts. Absolutely. That's a good point.
Okay.
So I got that advice to take half the checking account when you leave. I would take all of it, because if you're with an abusive person, you're not getting any of it back, because there's always so many other accounts that they don't know about. Does that make sense? So they're only on one. Okay.
And then some safety planning tips. I did a little research here. Some of them are to be careful as you gather documents and store information in a safe place, because abusive partners may set traps in files to detect if someone has accessed them. Also consult a domestic violence advocate or attorney, which you already said. Avoid mediation when at all possible due to safety risks. Establish a safety plan if you're required to attend a meeting where your partner will be present, including plans before, during, and after the meeting. Change or put additional passwords or PIN codes on your utility and credit card accounts to prevent your partner from illegally accessing or changing your accounts. So did you have anything to add to those? I remember having to change all my passwords and everything and just make sure he didn't have access to anything. So this is very critical that we said this part. Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say open another email address.
Yeah. You notice I have about 5 emails. Something from
and I think one of the things on here that I didn't do, but it should be done, is having a PO box. You don't need to send your mail to your house anymore. If it's already been established that you're being abused, please don't keep giving them access to things.
Yeah,
this is something where even if you want to send it to a parent's house, it doesn't matter. They don't need access to anything else. I think a really big mistake people make is trying to confront somebody that's abusive and controlling with money.
Yes.
We don't need to do that. That is on them. They already know what they're doing. As shocking as it is to you, they are fully aware. They have not made you an equal partner. You do not need to give them equal playing ground back. This is not that kind of conversation. This is how to get out safely. And approaching somebody about this is not going to be safe. That's one thing I would advise. I've seen that. They're like, well, I want them to explain why they spent my money. I'm like, do we? Right? Or do we or can we accept that they are spending it for whatever reason it is, right? And what are we going to do next? And so that's one thing I would say is you're going to, at the end of the day, find out things they're doing with the funds that you're probably not going to like. Now's not the best time to find that out. Now's the best time to guard yourself and get out. You will find out probably one way or another later, but we're not trying to add to the shock. And I think that's something where sometimes we get into investigation mode and we want answers from the abuser. This is not the time to get that.
Okay, so I have a question about just what are some of the impacts of financial abuse? The effects of financial abuse are often devastating. Victims feel inadequate and unsure of themselves due to the emotional abuse that accompanies financial abuse. They usually go together, probably.
Yeah.
They also have to go without food and other necessities because they have no money. In the short term, financial abuse leaves victims vulnerable to physical abuse and violence. Without access to money, credit cards, and other financial assets, it's extremely difficult to do any type of safety planning. For instance, if an abuser is particularly violent and the victim needs to leave in order to stay safe, this is difficult without money or a credit card. And if they need to leave the relationship permanently, it is challenging to find safe and affordable housing. They also struggle to provide for basic needs like food, clothing, and transportation. For those who do manage to escape abusive situation, they often face extreme difficulties in obtaining long-term housing, safety, and security. Victims often have spotty employment records, ruined credit histories, and mounting legal issues caused by years of financial abuse. Consequently, it is very difficult for them to establish independence and long-term security. In fact, many victims stay with or return to abusers due to concerns about financial stability.
And what are some of the tactics used by the abuser? Overall, financial abuse is very isolating because victims often become financially dependent on their abusers. This financial dependence traps them in the relationship. Without resources, they are unable to see their way out of this situation. Did you have anything to add to that?
It's weird because finance can either be used as a controlling aspect or showing really the heart of God and generosity. And so it tends to fall in one camp or another. I work with so many men every day, and I will find men in my industry that they're all about money. They're all about accumulating assets, which is a very big sign to me that their hearts aren't generous. And I think this is a very good way to tell. I mean, there's been times where I'm on a teeter-totter about a partner or a new business idea and who do you bring in? I think this abuse can also extend into obviously just business relationships and even churches, right? And I think the sign is what's somebody's heart? Is their heart about being generous? That's when you know somebody that God has control over money for them. And there's a really big difference when money has control over them or God has that control.
Yes.
And you see it by what they do with their money. That's why I'll always watch somebody for at least 90 days. How do they spend their money? Wow. What do they talk about?
Yeah. And good indicator, I guess, when you look at that.
It's such a good indicator. And for me, it'll check me, right? I don't need to talk about money. I'll just let somebody expose themselves. And there's been times where I'm like, all they talk about is their success, what they're bringing in. And it will drive somebody else crazy when you don't feel the need to talk about how little you have or how much you have. If you can stay in this realm of God's my provider, it will change everything for you. And I think the other thing I will say is I've lost everything twice, everything. From negative 250,000 to negative 2.5 million. And God's brought me back both times. And so I know that no matter how deep you're buried, you feel like you're never going to get out, right? The enemy's, it's the same lies. You're never going to get out. Your kids will never make it. And you're not going to be able to feed yourself. Who's going to provide housing? I can't even tell you how many people God put in my path that helped us, provided for us. It is a lie from the pit of hell that you won't recover. God's going to make this a platform for you. And I think that's the huge thing to get out of this is just because you're abused by something doesn't mean it won't come back and be your testimony of how good God is. It's going to change your outlook on money.
Testimony from what you've been through. You said you twice were in that position, and now look at you. You're using it for good because you're able to really relate because you know what that feels like. So that's
now we have another person inspiring me at the end of the podcast, and I just want to cry because I lost everything twice too. So now you're my inspiration.
I know that's that's very.
No, I think it's amazing. God's really told me that lately too. Of just be who you really are. You have to stay in your true identity,
right?
And I don't talk about money with people. I don't talk about what I do or don't have or what projects I'm working on. That's none of their business. God will expose somebody's heart through their words. If you find that you're dating somebody and they talk a lot about money, it's a red flag. That's not a priority. Money is not a priority. God is the priority. And so if it's something other than that, I can tell you there will be issues later. Because that's just a sign from God of that's not your heart.
Right.
And so if it's not your heart now, don't make it your heart later. Right. We don't want you to have to be in the situation of deciding, do I leave my beautiful house and all the things that I ever accumulated behind? It's a tough decision. It's the right one. Right. But I think that God will give you something back tenfold of what you had before. And I've watched him do that every time, even though everybody said it can't be done. There's just nothing God can't do. And the next time having it come as a blessing instead of a control tactic is night and day. Money that was received as a blessing doesn't feel the same as money that was given for a source of control. They're rooted in two different sources. And that's what I would say is right now, women and men that are experiencing abuse through money, the money will feel different when God gives it to you. It will feel like a blessing. It will feel like freedom. And there will be anointing that comes with it. So don't buy into the lie that the money that your spouse, your boyfriend is giving you right now is a source. It's not. Like cut off the source so God can give you a real source and give you money that doesn't run out.
Pure. It's not corrupt.
Well, we receive that.
It's like taking black market money versus money that you literally watch got made in front of you. And I think you have to remember that where it's sourced from is where the blessing comes from. So if it's sourced from control, it's not going to get blessed. If it's sourced from God and what he puts in your path, there's an anointing and blessing that comes with that money. It will go further than the control money. The control money will run out. It always does. These people do not get away with it forever. That is not real.
Amen.
He's trying to get you off of a sinking ship right now. And so get off that boat. It will sink. Don't believe it. It'll go down like the Titanic every time. It doesn't matter how good it looks. It will go down. And so it's a blessing if you're hearing this to get off of that boat and let God restore you financially. And no man, and this is something big that I always say to myself is men do not control who I am, where I'm going, or what I use to get there. And if that's what's happening to you right now, you already know it's not from God, right? And so it's a source. That's my number one thing I teach in finance is what is the source of funds? If it's from a controlling relationship, how do you think it's going to go? There's only one end for it, and it's destruction. You don't want to be a part of that.
Not controlling. His love is free. There's freedom in God's love.
Well, amen. We just want to thank you so much for coming on to the show. Having a voice is so healing. We just appreciate your expertise. And where can people find you if they're looking for financial help?
Probably the easiest thing would to be find me on Instagram, as weird as that sounds, Danielle R. Foreman. If you tag me on there, I'll have my assistant reach out. And I'm happy to help anyone that has gone through or is going through abuse. There's no charge for that. And I'm happy to give you whatever tips I have. Absolutely. And just know that God's going to get you out of that. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for what you do.
Yeah, you're
it's
an
so
inspiration.
needed with 98% of people struggling with abusive relationships.
Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate your inspiration, just sharing where you've been and how you're using what you've been through to help other people. So thank you so much. You're inspiring to me for sure.
Thanks for being on the podcast. Okay.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening. And until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.